Welcome back. Candidate Face-Off. Wednesday night, 4 GOP candidates met in Tuscaloosa, Alabama to duke it out for the 4th GOP debate to talk about some of the biggest issues in the headlines and talk about why they were the best alternative to former President Donald Trump. The debate, moderated by News Nation, constituted the smallest debate stage that we've seen yet, and with more time on their hands, the candidates went after each other.
We do not want to do someone that's
talking about him being 80 years old.
It doesn't mean that somebody couldn't get elected. That's up to the people to decide.
Governor DeSantis, let him.
We'll talk about who won, who lost, whose night was made, whose campaign broke, and who needs to get out of the race. We'll be taking a look at those stories and more today, December 8th, 2023. From Ishaan Media, this is the Ishaan S Show, a podcast about the interesting and ever-changing world of American politics, with me, your host, Ishaan. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us. 38 days until the Iowa Caucuses and 333 days until the election. We have just witnessed the final debate of the 2023 calendar year. That's what we saw on Wednesday night. Candidates met in Tuscaloosa, Alabama to duke things out. And the theme of the night that I just felt was, I don't know, because honestly, they've proven to me time and again that they are running for second place. And I see this huge hype by the news media about all these things that are going to happen, about what to look for. And then the same conclusion happens every single debate. The needle did not move. And that's what's going on again. So, so Republicans met and 4 candidates qualified. This time they actually reviewed the polling requirements to qualify to be on stage. So now instead of it being that you had to get, I believe 4%, now it's 6% in national qualifying polls, as well as, and I think 80,000 unique donors. That was a pretty big threshold for a lot of the candidates, and I think Tim Scott dropped out for that reason. Chris Christie barely made it on, but we had Chris Christie on the stage. We had Vivek Ramaswamy, Ron DeSantis, and then Nikki Haley. These were our 4 champions on stage, and they tried to go at it. And we'll talk about what I think. I think, to be honest, of all the nights that I've seen these candidates. I've seen them before they announced their runs for president. I've followed their careers. And to be totally honest, I was the most disappointed in each of these candidates from this debate stage. Like, I was so sad. I was even more sad when it was being reported that the Republican National Committee, the RNC, didn't want to host any more debates. But some good news, I guess, this morning came out that CNN is actually going to be hosting 2 new debates next year. So in January, they're going to be hosting 2 debates, one before the Iowa caucuses and one before the New Hampshire primary. So good news there, folks. More of these primetime events to watch them flounder. Okay, so the debate was hosted by News Nation. It was moderated by Elizabeth Vargas, a News Nation moderator, or anchor, excuse me. Eliana Johnson, a columnist with the conservative newspaper Washington Times, I think. I might be misattributing that. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then we had Megyn Kelly. And usually I don't spend a lot of time talking about the moderators, but Megyn Kelly is a really interesting wild card to have picked, because Megyn Kelly, for my friends who don't know, used to work on Fox News. She actually did moderate one of the first GOP debates back in 2016, and Trump attacked her on stage. She left Fox and then joined NBC News, and then she was fired from NBC News when she started making comments about white people wearing blackface. she lost her job there. And then she launched her own podcast, and her podcast has become incredibly successful. She's definitely unleashed her right-wing side on on her show. But okay, good enough. She's still finding her success, I guess. But she was an interesting pick to moderate this debate. And to be honest, I thought that she would do a much better job of holding down the crowd because she has experience. She is a good journalist in the sense that in the conservative circle, she's lauded as a good journalist. I thought that she'd be really good. But I will say, I will not get into the moderators too much after this point. I'll just say the moderators were the biggest losers of the evening. That was all I had to say. They went in with the plan of asking questions about Donald Trump, and honestly, they did not really do a good job of it, and they were not able to keep this unruly bunch of people quiet. It cut until Chris Christie to co-moderate the debate. We'll get into that clip in a second. But yeah, we got to that point. So the debate started at 7 p.m. Central Time. That's where I was watching it from. But for my East Coast friends, it was 8 p.m. over there. They talked about 40 days before the Iowa caucuses. It's the make or break for many of these campaigns. They started out the question with Democrats admit that Biden is bad. Like 70% of Democrats said that they would love to see somebody else, but that they would back him. And the same thing for Republicans and Trump. And theoretically saying that with the unpopularity of both of these candidates, with Biden's age and Trump's legal troubles, they started off saying that there is a very good possibility that one of them could be the leader of the free world one day. But Trump is beating them in the polls, so they had to make a stance for electability. Then Megyn Kelly directed it at DeSantis. She said, DeSantis, basically you were a flop. She put it in a more polite way, obviously, but she said DeSantis had a lot behind him, and then he failed. Nikki Haley's beating him. Donald Trump's beating him. Tim Scott dropped out of the race saying that voters were telling him no. Why don't you see that the voters are telling you no? Ron DeSantis responded. He was the first person to speak. He said, voters make decisions, He lauded his 2022 re-election campaign where they talked about the red wave flop. But his state, actually to his credit, he won by 20 points in Florida, so good for him. He says he's sick of the GOP who can't fight the left. And he says he's beaten left-wing people. He said he's beaten the teachers union, the left, Fauci, George Soros. But then within the first 2 minutes, he attacked Nikki Haley, and Nikki Haley was attacked. The moderators then asked Nikki a question. They said, Nikki, they talked about a report about how she was not as wealthy when she was UN ambassador. She was in debt. She had very little money. But then suddenly after leaving and joining the boards of Raytheon and Boeing, she became a millionaire. They basically tried. I didn't like the question. I thought that they basically were calling her corrupt. They were saying that she was now with rich billionaires and they're backing her tight with the banks. So Nikki Haley responds with to Ron DeSantis, so Ron DeSantis criticized her on her stance on the Don't Say Gay bill. Apparently, according to him, she said it didn't go far enough, which in itself, the bill actually does go pretty far, but she was criticizing him for it not going far enough. He said that she thought it went too far. A lot of, asterisks. She criticized him for that. She said that the Don't Say Gay bill she thought didn't go far enough. Then she was talking about the corporate donor. She said she would take support from whomever, that she said she was a Tea Party conservative, and touted her Republican record. She said corporate people don't, I don't ask what their policies are, they ask for mine. And then she flexed her Koch brothers endorsement. It's a pretty big endorsement to get that network of $70 million backing her. So she fit in that endorsement. I'm not sure if we'll play the clip. Let's play the clip. Let's play the clip of Nikki Haley talking about her Koch brothers endorsement.
And so I've had a fight. And so as much as Ron says that, that's not true. But when it comes to these corporate people that want to suddenly support us, we'll take it. But I don't ask them what their policies are. They ask me what my policies are. And I tell them what it is. Sometimes they agree with me, sometimes they don't. Some don't like how tough I am on China. Some don't like the fact that I've signed pro-life bills. Some don't like the fact that I may oppose corporate bailouts. That doesn't matter. That's who I am. And that's why the most conservative grassroots group in the country, Americans for Prosperity, endorsed me last week.
After a while, Nikki Haley started talking, and then they went to Vivek Ramaswamy. I loved the way they asked this question. They basically called Vivek annoying AF, and then summarizing his smugness as not being a unifier. Vivek responded saying he needs a fighter. We need a fighter. He said that there were good people on stage, and then went to attack Nikki Haley. He said Nikki Haley was bankrupt and that she was in for corporate interests. He essentially called her corrupt, and he said that woke CEOs were supporting Nikki Haley. And then he started saying that he was a leader from the outside. I liked Nikki Haley's response to this. She said that she is a person of service, that she loved working for Boeing because they built a lot of jobs. I thought that it was a very well-handled debate. Then we went back, and then Ron DeSantis was pulled in, and Ron DeSantis was criticizing her corporate donors, and Vivek, Ron, and Nikki Haley all were arguing on stage. And then after a while, Nikki Haley then says, quote, "I love the attention, fellas." I thought that that was a solid response. And then they got into a few more technicals. They were still, barking at each other. Chris Christie finally got to speak 17 minutes into the night, 7:17 p.m. There are 4 candidates, and he got to speak at 7:17. So that should tell you just how much these people were arguing. There was a point where I think Chris Christie was going to talk, and then he's like, actually, wait, never mind. That the moderators were like, okay, whoops, sorry, Chris, we're going to wait a minute. But then they finally got to Chris Christie, and then they talked about his support for Donald Trump, but then not anymore, and criticizing. So Megyn Kelly straight up asked, how can you be a nominee for a party who really doesn't like you? Then Chris Christie, I really felt was one of his stronger points. He had a strong night in general, but he basically was talking about how they went 17 minutes into the debate, and the 3 of them were fighting each other, and it's like, and they were doing it as if there was the 4 of them on stage, when in reality, Trump was taking away the nomination. Listen to this clip of Chris Christie.
Yeah, well, look, Megyn, it's often very difficult to be the only person on the stage who's telling the truth, and the only person who is taking on what needs to be taken on. I look at my watch now. We're 17 minutes into this debate. And except for your little speech in the beginning, we've had these 3 acting as if the race is between the 4 of us. The 5th guy, who doesn't have the guts to show up and stand here, he's the one who, as you just put it, is way ahead in the polls. And yet, I've got these 3 guys who are all seemingly to compete with, Voldemort, he who shall not be named. They don't want to talk about it. The fact is that when you go and you say the truth about somebody who is a dictator, a bully, who has taken shots at everybody, whether they've given him great service or not over time, who dares to disagree with him, then I understand why these 3 are timid to say anything about it. Maybe it's because they have future aspirations. Maybe those future aspirations are now, or maybe they're 4 years from now. But the fact of the matter is the truth needs to be told.
Okay, and then after that whole spiel, they finally then changed topics, and this time they started talking about the Gaza crisis, and it is between Israel and Gaza. So they were talking about the strategy. All 4 candidates criticized Biden's handling of it, but when they specifically asked Ron DeSantis about sending in troops into Israel to support them, he was criticized by Chris Christie for not giving an answer. He attacked Ron DeSantis. He said that you can't give a 90-second speech to your generals and Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense. He says that Ron DeSantis is not answering the question. We'll get to this in a second, because this apparently really got on Chris Christie's nerves that he wouldn't answer questions. Then Ramaswamy said that it was that Nikki Haley's rhetoric behind the October 7th attack, including vaguely saying, quote, "finish them," referring to Hamas, was irresponsible. He condemned what Hamas did, but Vivek, what I thought was really funny in that Republican primary debate where Vivek declared himself to be the most pro-Israel candidate on the stage. There were so many laughs that we heard after that. I thought it was really funny. But the real thing that happened was Vivek criticized Nikki Haley, but not on a policy level, but actually on an intelligence level. He attacked her for basically being unable to tell the difference between Israel and the United States. And he said something to the effect of, my 3-year-old, referring to his son, could probably do it for him. Actually, we're going to play that clip.
I believe I have the strongest pro-Israel position actually on the stage, even though it's a little bit different than the standard GOP talking points. And it is this. The founding vision of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, the George Washington figure of Israel, what did he believe? He believed that we don't want, as Israel, to depend on the fleeting sympathies of the West and have our hands tied. I think Israel has an absolute right to defend itself to the fullest, without the U.S., the UN, or the EU, or anybody else second-guessing their decisions, as the Biden administration, guess what, is now starting to do. I think that's a more deeply pro-Israel position than anybody else, and it keeps the actual lines of accountability clear because it is a pro-American position. And as leader of the United States of America, just as a father of 2 sons, my sole moral duty is to my family. As your next president, my sole moral duty is to you, the people of this country. That's how I'm going to lead. So I'll tell.
And then Nikki Haley got to talk about the Israeli crisis, but she was more presented with a question about Iran. And the moderators were trying to suggest that she was talking about bombing Iran, which she wasn't, but she criticized the Biden administration. She said, well, first she said that she didn't want to bomb Iran. She says that they respond to strength. She says that they couldn't give $6 billion for 5 hostages like the Biden administration did. She said that 140 strikes in Syria. She used her punch 'em and punch 'em hard rhetoric. She suggested going after their infrastructure, things of that nature. After that, Vivek then started speaking again. And this time he says that foreign policy experience is better than foreign policy expertise. Or actually the other way around. And he said he was somehow an expert in foreign policy. We could play the clip. I'm going to play a clip from Debate 1, I think, of Nikki Haley criticizing Vivek Ramaswamy. Let's listen to that.
Win for Russia is a win for China. We have to know that. Ukraine is the first line of defense for us. And the problem that Vivek doesn't understand is he wants to hand Ukraine to Russia. He wants to let China eat Taiwan. He wants to go and stop funding Israel. You don't do that to friends. What you do instead is you have the backs of your friends. Ukraine is the front line of defense. Putin has said once Russia takes Ukraine, Poland and the Baltics are next. That's a world war. We're trying to prevent war. Look at what Putin did today. He killed Prigozhin. When I was at the UN, the Russian ambassador suddenly died. This guy is a murderer, and you are choosing a murderer over a pro-American country.
First of all, Mr. Ramaswamy, you have 30 seconds. Mr. DeSantis,
Nikki, I wish you well in your future career on the boards of Lockheed and Raytheon.
I'm not on the boards of Lockheed and Raytheon. And
Boeing came off of it, but you've been pushing this lie. You've been pushing this lie all week, Nikki.
You want to go and defund Israel? You want to
okay, let me address that. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to address each of those right now. This is the false lies of a professional politician. There you have it.
Your watch, so the reality is, America less safe. You have no foreign policy experience, and it shows.
And you know what? The foreign policy experience that you all have.
And then Vivek just goes to town on Nikki Haley, and I think this was probably the most memorable part of the night. He went to town on Nikki Haley. He basically attacked her basic intelligence. I thought it was pretty desperate. We'll talk about what I thought of the attack itself. And then, interestingly enough, surprise twist, Chris Christie came to Nikki Haley's defense. And he really went after Ramaswamy. I saw Christie genuinely enjoying beating Vivek Ramaswamy like a drum. And it was hilarious to see him do that. Because it was literally for Nikki Haley. And if you saw the Ishaan S show post on Instagram yesterday, you would know that Chris Christie, from that moment, I kind of suggested that this could be grounds for a new endorsement in case Chris Christie drops out of the race and decides to endorse Nikki Haley. He said things like, they had a whole exchange where he's like, I'm not done talking yet. Oh, told some of them telling each other to shut up. He called Ramaswamy the most obnoxious. I have this clip for you guys too. I know today's a clip heavy day, but I love this clip. So let's listen to it.
Okay, hold on.
Let me just say something here. You know, his reasonable peace deal in Ukraine, he made it clear. Give them all the land they've already stolen. Promise Putin you'll never put Ukraine in Russia, and then trust Putin not to have a relationship with China. Let me tell you something. That's no
That's
reasonable.
not my deal. That's not my deal,
yes,
Chris.
it's exactly what you said.
You
do this at every debate.
I'll tell you exactly what it is.
Don't interrupt me. I didn't interrupt you. Okay? You say this.
About how you want to send our kids to die.
You do this at every debate. You go out on the stump and you say something. All of us see it on video. We confront you out on the debate stage. You say you didn't say it, and then you back away. And I want to say
what? Exactly what I said, Chris.
I'm not done yet.
Well, this is
now look.
This is nonsense. This man is spewing. This man is spewing nonsense.
Let me tell you something. This is the fourth debate that you would be voted in the first 20 minutes as the most obnoxious blowhard in America. So shut up for a little while.
I'm going to respond to that.
I want to say
Your version of we're going to let you respond to that. We're going to let you respond to that. Let him finish.
I want to say something else. We're now 25 minutes into this debate, and he has insulted Nikki Haley's basic intelligence, not her positions, her basic intelligence. She doesn't know regions. She wouldn't be able to find something on a map that his 3-year-old could find. Look, if you want to disagree on issues, that's fine. And Nikki and I disagree on some issues. But I'll tell you this, I've known her for 12 years, which is longer than he's even started to vote in a Republican primary. And while we disagree about some issues and we disagree about who should be president of the United States, what we don't disagree on is this is a smart, accomplished woman, and you should stop insulting her.
So I'm going to take this, several times over. So first of all, I think we just learned something from Chris Christie. We learned three things. We learned three things right there. First of all, Chris Christie also doesn't know what provinces in eastern Ukraine he actually wants us to fight for. Chris, your version of foreign policy experience was closing a bridge from New Jersey to New York. Yeah. So do everybody a favor, just walk yourself off that stage, enjoy a nice meal, and get the hell out of this race. When it comes to Nikki, I think if you're going to actually send your sons and daughters to go die in somebody else's war, you better, excuse me, Chris, I'm speaking, and I'm not done yet.
I haven't heard the time when you aren't
and we're going to be
speaking.
done. So listen up to this, is if these people want to send your sons and daughters to go die in Ukraine, they've been arguing for it for a year. $200 billion of our taxpayer money sent over. Neither of them could even name for you the provinces that they actually want to protect. And this is the people who have been touting their so-called foreign policy experience.
Then they went at it for a while. It was really exhausting to watch. I watched it for you guys. You're welcome. And I think it ended before the commercial break. It ended with Chris Christie basically calling Ramaswamy a smartass Democrat from Harvard, which was such a funny insult that I thought could have been used in a GOP debate. And then I have one more moment I want to talk about, and then we'll get into some analysis. But they come back from the break. They talked about the southern border crisis. Fentanyl came up, illegal immigration. They talked about using special ops. Catch and deport, they said, would come back. So they were talking about all that stuff. Then Nikki Haley came up. And Nikki Haley criticized former President Donald Trump, which was odd, but it was on a more policy level. So she criticized Donald Trump, and that set her up with Ron DeSantis. Because then Ron DeSantis essentially criticized her and accused her for being a pretty pro-China governor when she was governor of South Carolina. And then he criticized her for her donors being very pro-China as well, and that they flocked to her. And then they had their little back and forth. And Nikki Haley then accused Ron DeSantis of being a lot more cushy with the Chinese investors that came to his state. So they had a back and forth about who's more pro-China and who isn't. So take a listen to this final clip that I think we have. We'll see if it's the final one, but I think this should be the final clip.
China, though. I mean, this is rich, because when she was governor of South Carolina, she was the #1 ranked governor of bringing the CCP into her state. She wrote a love letter to the Chinese ambassador saying how great a friend China is. You can look at it. We put it on our website, rondesantis.com. There's also a video of her as governor standing in front of a Chinese flag with a Chinese business saying that she now works for them, talking about this Chinese company. So she's been very weak on China. Now, here's the problem. The rhetoric is different, but her donors, these Wall Street liberal donors, they make money in China. They are not going to let her be tough on China, and she will cave to the donors. She will not stand up for you.
15 seconds, Ambassador.
First of all, he's mad because those Wall Street donors used to support him and now they support me. The second thing is he has a company, a Chinese company, UGAS, that he just did a rally there last year. They have given you $340,000 in campaign donations
American company.
between them and their employees. They are tied to the Communist Chinese Party. Jinko Solar is another one. They went and expanded. You gave $2 million in subsidies.
I banned China from buying land in the state of Florida.
The Department of Homeland
I ejected the Confucius Institute. Nikki Haley brought Confucius Institutes to the universities in South Carolina.
That is not true.
I ejected them. So I have a record of standing up and do what's right. And here's the thing.
You have a record of lying.
She's trying to say things like that. Even the liberal media groups.
No, you're pro-China. No, you're pro-China. No, you're pro-China. That was basically what that whole exchange was. And then they basically, the debate got pretty stale after that, which you'd be surprised. Just watching the clips, because it didn't seem like anything was stale, but comparatively this was a bit more peaceful, I guess. No one was criticizing Donald Trump the whole time, except for those few. Kristi, with the exception of Kristi. Kristi only criticized Trump, but like the other ones that actually mattered, they didn't really do anything. So let's see. I think one more thing that I wanted to touch on in terms of what happened moments was when Ron DeSantis was asked if he thought Trump would be too old to be president when he became president, because technically he'd be older than Biden was on his first day. Ron DeSantis gave this really long-winded answer, but then no actual substantive response. And Chris Christie called him out on it. And this was that co-moderator moment that I really felt like. I wasn't saying Christie for president 2024. I was shouting Chris Christie for moderator 2028. Because Chris Christie really pushed Ron DeSantis' buttons and criticized him for not really going and challenging Trump. And this was seen as DeSantis' weakest moment from the night. Because he just wouldn't answer the question. And Christie was really going after him. So here's this final clip of Chris Christie going after Ron DeSantis.
Answer the question. The question was very direct. Is he fit to be president or isn't he? The rest of the speech is interesting, but completely non-responsive. And if we were in a courtroom, they'd strike the answer and say, Governor DeSantis.
No, they wouldn't. They would say that
you're a smart
they would
man.
Argue that
No, they would.
No, they wouldn't.
They would
Chris.
strike the answer.
No, they wouldn't.
Because you're not answering
you
it. Is he
don't
fit?
Like, you
is
have
he
your
fit?
you have
no.
your thing.
Is he
you
fit
have
or isn't
your
he?
thing.
No, I don't have my thing.
We don't.
He's the thing. Is he fit or isn't he?
Do
you're talking about him being 80 years old.
It doesn't mean that somebody couldn't get elected. That's up to the people to
Governor
decide.
DeSantis, let him finish. Governor DeSantis, let him finish.
Ron, is he
I think we have an opportunity to do somebody who is in the prime of their life. You don't have to worry about all this stuff with confidence. We can get it done, and we'll do it.
I'm going to come to you. Finish.
Look, Father Time is undefeated. I don't know how he would score on a test, but I know this. We have an opportunity to nominate someone and elect someone for 2 terms who's going to be spitting nails on day one and for 8 years deliver you big result. We should not nominate somebody who's almost 80 years old.
Okay. He's afraid to answer.
No, I'm not.
You have to either you're afraid or you're not listening.
No, it's not.
There's a simple question.
Is he fit?
Nobody can hear this. No one can hear you. They can't hear you. You finish and then you get it back.
All right. So that was the collection of some notable moments that I felt were worth talking about from the debate. I thought those were some nice moments that could highlight some good, some bad, some chaos, some stupidity. But really, it was a collection of unusual ignorance to the fact that they are all running for second place. I think that is what we need to understand about this. these candidates, and Chris Christie pointed that out. I can't believe how much I am agreeing with Christie right now. Like, the number of times I've said Chris Christie was right about this is so true, because Chris Christie pointed out the fact that literally these candidates are running for second place to a guy that is stealing the nomination by 50 points. So what purpose do they have of doing this? Who knows? 15%, 14%, 5%, and 3%. They spent the time attacking each other and not the front runner. And I just don't understand why they think this way, because the first rule of politics is that you're supposed to attack the front runner, unless of course you have a different agenda in mind or you're looking at higher office. I don't understand why, really, I just don't understand why they aren't attacking Donald Trump unless they see themselves suiting for a different job. It really doesn't make sense I guess Ramaswamy makes sense, because Ramaswamy was out there blowing out conspiracy theory after conspiracy. He said January 6th was an inside job. Like, okay, we know who he's trying to cater to, and I've already dismissed him. I'm officially saying that he needs to drop out too. Chris Christie, he was the only one criticizing Donald Trump, but then again, Megyn Kelly also pointed out that 75% of Republicans hate Chris Christie. So, okay, the two candidates who are equipped to take on Donald Trump, Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, instead of attacking him, Nikki Haley kind of did it. They were attacking each other. And that is the problem with this Republican primary. They have no understanding. It's like they pretend Trump is not 50 points ahead of each of them. And that really, and that's why I was so and that's why I said at the top of the show that I am disappointed in each of these candidates, in the sense as a political observer, as somebody that watches politics, that watches politicians basically as my job right now. Like, this is what I do. I couldn't believe how disappointed I was. These people are not politicking, right? Like, they are, I don't know what. Obviously, none of them is going to drop out as long as they have the money and the resources to continue to run. But if this is what their approach is, then they should just let Donald Trump become the nominee, because they are clearly not serious. But obviously, they don't think this way, so their strategy somehow needs to change. And I guess they're praying on one miracle, which is that somehow Donald Trump gets convicted by, like, New Hampshire, which is never going to happen. I mean, the court cases, the earliest of them starts on January 2nd, so it's not like anything's going to happen. So I don't really know what they're going for anymore. I just think it's a sign of weakness. That was a criticism for everybody. As for each of the individual candidates, we're going to start from the bottom up in terms of expectations. I think with Chris Christie, he was the lowest polling candidate. He barely made it onto the stage. And honestly, as a Republican candidate, he made less of a case for himself to be on the next stage. So I think he really played it smart. I think he's realized that he's not going to be president. But now he needs to leverage his support for something better than he has now, which is nothing. And I think that defense of Nikki Haley that I played earlier, that is probably the biggest piece of evidence for me to show that he's showing his willingness to drop out and support somebody the way he came to Nikki Haley's defense. And all the pundits are saying it. He's vehemently rejected that. But really, I think that's what he's going for. So in terms of that, I think Christie was a success. How much would that endorsement hurt Nikki Haley? Well, I think it could hurt a little because Christie's so anti-Trump. But I wonder, I really do wonder just how much that could have been done to help Christie win, because honestly, from 1% to 6%, like, that's about as good as he's been doing. Like, he had to scramble to find polls with 6% to qualify. He's not seriously running for president, guys. Like, come on. He knows that he doesn't have any constituency in the Republican Party. Then for Vivek Ramaswamy, I've said it before. I think the guy's obnoxious, and that's not as a biased whatever. I just think the guy's obnoxious. He's literally not. I just don't think he has a spot on the stage. He is such a jerk to some of the people running. Like, the way he attacked Nikki Haley, I just thought it was really unbecoming of his candidacy, and it's not something that you do as president of the United States. And that, and then bloating out conspiracy theories, those were the two things that he kept doing over and over again. And I just thought it was frustrating. He has a frustrating presence on stage, and he's obnoxious in general. So if he has to go, then he needs to drop out. He has a lot of money, so maybe he won't. I guess not, but he needs to go. He's wasting everybody's time. And I'd say the same thing for Christie. It's just Christie doesn't get on my nerves as much as him. Vivek Ramaswamy just gets on everybody's nerves. As for Ron DeSantis, now technically Ron DeSantis is the highest polling candidate on that stage, but as for expectations and performance in general over the last month, he's been doing the poorest, so I put him in second place. Ron did a good job. I mean, in the sense that he didn't like hurt his candidacy. That's like the do no harm principle he did for himself. So I guess that was good. Although his constant attacks on Haley were so obsessive and desperate, I felt bad for him, because he became desperate to make a case for himself in that sense. Like, if that makes sense, like Nikki Haley got the Koch brothers endorsement, and I think she got the Koch brothers endorsement, and they backed her over him, and I think that really stung as a candidate. I mean, it's a blow to his ego. He's a politician too, guys. Come on. Just didn't realize how hurt he'd actually be. He was pretty hurt. I just think he continued to just make a case for himself to be in the contention to be number 2. He definitely can reverse what he's done to himself in third debate. So this debate kind of helped reverse that. So, I mean, it might work. I think it might help out. We need to see how his numbers show, specifically in Iowa, because the rhetoric he was using was really trying to appeal to the evangelical base of Iowa voters. So we'll need to see how he does there. And then lastly, Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley is a person who I've consistently rated as the first place performer in each of these debates. Tonight, or whatever, last night, I just didn't think she did it well. I thought she was a second place. She came in second place. I did not think she did well. She went in with a lot of expectations, but then again, it's not her fault. She is fielding attacks from 3 guys relentlessly, and so that's what if you saw the Ishaan S show post, I called it winner problems. She's a winner, and she's having those problems that come with being a winner, which is having a target on your back. I think she handled many of the attacks pretty well. There was a point where Vivek Ramaswamy wrote Nikki equals corrupt, like, oh my God, like a bozo, I guess. I shouldn't say that on this show, but like, come on. She writes Nikki equals corrupt and then puts that up for everyone to read. Nikki Haley says, I don't have the time to respond to this. This is not worth my time. You could see it go both ways. I just thought she seemed defeated after a while, and it's not like the way she has been. She has these one-liner zingers. She has responses ready, and I just felt that she didn't meet her expectations. Obviously, there's another debate in January, and it's not like the Koch brothers are taking away $70 million from her now that they've pledged it. They'll look like idiots. So she will still have money, and she'll still have support. And I don't think she's going to lose anything from this debate per se. I actually don't think so. I just think she's now been shown to be the rising star. She is the woman to beat, and I think for second place. She's the woman to beat, and I think the candidates see her as a legitimate threat now, and I don't even think she's at that point anymore. She is the number 1 person on that stage. So she was feeling the attacks that a number 1 candidate would face. Whereas in this primary, we've seen it shift from Haley to DeSantis to Pence to Scott. Unlike in 2020, where the attacks were constantly on Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. Here it's shifting, and Nikki Haley now has that crown. And she has that crown at a pretty nice time, because we are, again, 38 days from the Iowa caucuses, and then just a little over that away from the New Hampshire primary. And New Hampshire is where she's betting more of her money, not as much in Iowa. So we're going to need to see how she performs there. But overall, I'd say the JV round was pretty lame. And all this analysis that I just gave you came on the assumption that Donald Trump was just not in the race. But the fact is he's undeniably in this race, and he's done a lot in the past few weeks that we haven't talked about. And despite that, he is still the number one candidate. So, that's where things stand there, I guess. All right, so that was a look at the 2024 GOP primary debate number 4, which was said to be the last one, but not anymore. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for sitting down with me and listening to half an hour of my analysis with all these little clips. I appreciate all your support. We will see you next week. Don't forget to share this episode and all your other favorite episodes. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye. And so that does it for us here today at the Ishaan S Show. If you liked my commentary, then go ahead and follow the Ishaan S Show on Twitter and Instagram for breaking news posts and updates about the show. And if you want to learn more about political stories, then check out my political news blog on the IshaanSshow.com and go ahead and subscribe to it. Do us a favor and share this episode and all your other favorite episodes with your friends and family. It's the best way for this show to grow and get more people listening to it. Thanks again for all your support, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.